Buonasera a tutti. È un grande piacere avervi qui oggi. Come potete immaginare è anche una grandissima emozione, sempre una grandissima emozione vedere questa sala così piena. Non è che avessimo dei dubbi sul fatto che questo evento sarebbe stato molto frequentato, perché penso sia veramente un evento speciale. Non capita tutti i giorni di avere qui a Palazzo Ducale, a Genova, e in occasione di una nostra mostra, una personalità del calibro di Daniel Libeskind, che è veramente uno dei nomi più noti, più importanti a livello mondiale dell'architettura contemporanea. Quindi io, prima di tutto, desidero ringraziare Mr. Libeskind per aver accolto il nostro invito con tanta generosità e con tanta disponibilità. È per noi veramente un grande piacere e un grande onore. Questo incontro si colloca nell'ambito delle attività collaterali che abbiamo strutturato intorno alla mostra Paganini Rockstar, che auspico tutti voi abbiate già visto, e se non l'avete visto vi invito veramente a farlo, perché chiuderà domenica e penso sarebbe un'occasione perduta quella di non averla vista, perché è una mostra, penso, molto innovativa e molto coraggiosa, che penso comunque possa offrire molti spunti e valga la pena di essere vista. È una mostra che abbiamo pensato di dedicare ad un genio della nostra storia, ma che in realtà è un genio della musica universale e che è sicuramente più affascinante e più interessante, più intrigante di quanto sia soliti in fin dei conti pensare di lui. È una mostra che ne mette in luce vari aspetti, vuole raccontarlo a 360 gradi, vuole raccontarlo come talento innato, come grande virtuoso, come grande violinista, ma soprattutto come grande innovatore, un musicista che sa innovare il modo di suonare il violino. Dopo di lui il violino non si suonerà più nello stesso modo e quindi veramente è straordinariamente determinante per la musica che verrà dopo di lui, anche per la presenza del violino nell'ambito del complesso orchestrale. E poi è soprattutto uno straordinario innovatore per quello che riguarda la relazione con il pubblico. Con lui il concerto non è più soltanto un concerto, ma diventa una vera e propria performance, e lui riesce a instaurare con il suo pubblico un'empatia e a trasmettere con la sua musica un'emozione che prima di lui in fin dei conti non era riuscito nessuno a fare. Tant'è vero che poi ai suoi concerti il pubblico va in delirio, sviene, grida e partecipa in maniera veramente straordinaria. Diciamo anche questi piccoli accenni possono dare degli indizi a quelli che saranno i contenuti della conversazione che si svolgerà a breve. Diciamo, noi abbiamo cercato di avere appunto nell'ambito delle collaterali alla mostra una serie di approfondimenti di questa personalità straordinaria e anche diciamo dei suggerimenti di letture trasversali. E una di queste letture trasversali era proprio quella dedicata al rapporto tra musica e architettura. Un rapporto intensissimo, molto interessante, molto stimolante, e proprio per questo abbiamo pensato di coinvolgere, per organizzare l'evento di questa sera, la Fondazione Ordine degli Architetti. Quindi io sono molto grata alla Fondazione Ordine degli Architetti, a Benedetto Besio, il suo presidente in particolare, con cui abbiamo lavorato fianco a fianco per molte settimane, perché l'architetto Besio ha subito colto il senso di questo nostro invito, di questa nostra richiesta, e ha, direi, individuato quello che era veramente, credo, il nome più appropriato, più giusto in questo contesto, perché io penso che nessuno più di Daniel Libeskind in questa situazione fosse la persona giusta da invitare. Quindi a maggior ragione ne siamo molto felici che appunto la Fondazione Ordine degli Architetti ci abbia sostenuto e organizzato con noi questo evento. e quindi diciamo veramente grazie, perché se no insieme, senza di loro non ci saremmo sicuramente riusciti, senza la dedizione anche dell'architetto Besio. E un grazie particolare anche all'architetto Ghirardelli, che sicuramente è stato un tramite fondamentale per la riuscita di questa liaison, diciamo, e che poi si è dato disponibile a condurre la conversazione con Mr. Libeskind. Quindi io lascio adesso la parola a Benedetto Besio e vi auguro una buona serata.
Buonasera anche da parte mia, grazie ovviamente anche da parte mia, grazie a Palazzo Ducale per averci coinvolto, grazie soprattutto a Daniel Libeskind di aver accettato il nostro invito e anche ad Agostino Ghirardelli che gioca in casa qua, genovese, e che ci ha aiutato in questa storia. Io pensavo semplicemente di rubarvi pochissimo tempo, ma di introdurre velocemente la figura di Daniel Libeskind, perché lui, in questi giorni io ovviamente ho letto molte cose su di lui, in particolare la sua autobiografia Breaking Ground, e Libeskind, quando viene interrogato sulla sua architettura, dà sempre molta importanza all'architettura come specchio della sua vita, della vita anche delle città in cui interviene, della memoria, eccetera, eccetera. Quindi ho pensato che sarebbe stato utile conoscere un pochino anche per voi, molto velocemente, i tratti principali della vita di Daniel Libeskind, che ha toccato, sfiorato, è venuto in contatto con molti eventi fondamentali del Novecento e non solo del Novecento. Perché così meglio forse capirete anche il senso della conversazione che poi farà con Agostino Ghirardelli sulla musica, sul suo rapporto con la musica e poi di lì anche sull'ispirazione dei suoi lavori, eccetera. Nasce a Łódź in Polonia nel 1946, figlio di sopravvissuti dell'Olocausto che fuggono dalla Polonia per l'arrivo dei nazisti e vanno in Russia, dove però in Russia vengono internati nei gulag e quindi conoscono direttamente la tragedia dell'Olocausto e dopo un certo numero di anni riescono a tornare a Łódź, credo con Daniel in gestazione, durante il viaggio di ritorno sua madre aveva Daniel in pancia, diciamo, e arrivano a Łódź dove la città è diventata, la popolazione ebraica della città da 225.000 persone è passata in pochi anni a 3.000. Questo dà un'idea della dimensione del fenomeno e comunque la popolazione ebraica non veniva trattata molto bene comunque anche nel regime comunista. La famiglia Libeskind ottiene un permesso per andare in Israele, si trasferisce in Israele quando Daniel ha 11 anni, prima in un kibbutz. Lui dice nella sua autobiografia: fuggivamo dal comunismo e siamo andati in un kibbutz comunista molto rigido e molto... però di lì poi vanno a Tel Aviv e poi successivamente a New York. Ma nel periodo dell'adolescenza matura e cresce la passione e la pratica della musica per Daniel Libeskind. Non è un appassionato di musica in generico. Ha fatto musica anche professionalmente, ha vinto un importantissimo concorso. Poi di tutte queste cose però sorvolo un pochino perché ne parlerà più estesamente con Agostino. Ma il suo rapporto con la musica è un rapporto molto intenso, molto forte e appunto quasi professionale. A New York conosce finalmente la libertà, mi ha colpito il punto in cui racconta che la cosa che lo colpisce nelle strade di New York è sentir parlare Yiddish, che in Polonia non era possibile fare. E quindi diventa americano nel giro di poco tempo, inizia a studiare, spinto dalla madre, studia architettura e si indirizza di più verso questo. Lui dice: io non ho mai cambiato la mia disciplina, la musica e l'architettura sono la stessa cosa, ve lo racconterà meglio, però in pratica inizia un percorso di studi di teoria e storia dell'architettura a New York, poi a Londra, nell'Essex, a Londra, in giro per il mondo, insegnando in molti posti, compresi alla Cranbrook a Detroit. Poi si trasferisce a Milano, dove fonda una scuola di architettura e dall'85 all'89 sta a Milano. Nell'88 però l'attività che faceva di carattere teorico, di storia dell'architettura, eccetera, è accompagnata da un grande lavoro di disegni, non di progetti realizzati, di disegni. Nell'88 viene invitato per questi suoi disegni in una mostra memorabile, storica, importantissima a New York, al MoMA, sull'architettura decostruttivista. I nomi di questa mostra, lo dico per i molti architetti, erano Rem Koolhaas, Daniel Libeskind, Frank Gehry, Zaha Hadid, Peter Eisenman, Bernard Tschumi, tutta gente che successivamente sono diventate nomi di primissima grandezza nel panorama architettonico internazionale. Comincia a fare concorsi, nell'89 la svolta, vince il concorso di Berlino, del Museo Ebraico di Berlino, e inizia la vicenda della costruzione. Lui non ha mai costruito nulla prima e inizia con un edificio complessissimo, difficile, con un'atmosfera ostile da parte dell'amministrazione pubblica che non si fida, eccetera. Dopo 10 anni, quando ormai ha più di 50 anni, l'edificio è finito. È il primo edificio suo, insieme a quello, credo, di Osnabrück. Ma l'edificio viene inaugurato completamente in una data che dovete capire, 11 settembre 2001. Dopo poche ore 2 jet si schiantano sulle Torri Gemelle. Dopo 1 anno e mezzo Daniel Libeskind vince il concorso per la sistemazione, il master plan di Ground Zero. Una serie di concatenazioni a dir poco singolari. E comunque tutta la vicenda ancora più singolare è questa carriera quasi divisa in un prima e un dopo, dall'89 in poi, grandi costruzioni, ma che nascono da tutto un retroterra culturale molto importante. Credo di aver detto quello che c'era da dire per capire un pochino la personalità di Libeskind. 2 parole per Agostino Ghirardelli, che anche lui ha la sua importanza qui, 45enne, architetto genovese, però un percorso di lavoro direi quasi tutto fuori di qui, prima con Fuxas, poi con Daniel Libeskind, prima a New York e a Milano successivamente. E ora ci ha aiutato in questa serata. Grazie ancora a tutti, invito qua Agostino e Daniel Libeskind.
Grazie. Buonasera.
Buonasera. So Daniel, thanks for coming and being with us today. Okay, where just have you come from? Where have you been?
I came from Zurich, from Krakow in Poland, from Berlin, from London, and now I'm here in this beautiful city. Fantastic.
Great, get lost. So, before starting, let's get to the point. Now we will listen a music piece from Niccolò Paganini, a piece you choose, let's say a piece you know, so the Capriccio 24.
Not a piece that I know, a piece that I love.
Okay, great. So this helps us to step in the topic of tonight. So to try to investigate a little bit more in the field between music and architecture.
Well, we just saw an example of spiritual light that has transformed the space. That's the genius of Paganini. Paganini is not just a great composer and a famous genius who influenced generations of artists, but he's a major power architecturally, because when you heard those sounds, you could hear almost a narrative of atomic particles which are present in the space. That's the beauty of Paganini. Not just another composer, not just a genius, not just an inspired musician, but really somebody who comes from the world of the divine, spiritual world. He might have been considered to be inspired by the devil, but he was inspired by God.
By your point of view, can this piece be used to describe a project, architectural project, maybe someone of yours?
Definitely. Well, you can hear the intensity, the passion, and you can hear the dynamics of sudden change from lightning to darkness, from light to slowness, from speed to time. It's really, I think, a definition of any project that is inspired is in Paganini, definitely.
So let's talk a little bit about Paganini, Niccolò Paganini life. He came from an humble family. His father was a shipper from the port here of Genoa. So he was introduced by his father to the string instruments, mandolin, guitar, and violin. So he was introduced and then he found his way in the music. Talking about you, Daniel, who introduced you to the music? What's your story behind that?
Well, you know, I was born, as you heard, in Poland, in a dark time, a time of communism, time of a dictatorship, and time of deep anti-Semitism, which was also part of the government idea. So as a Jewish person, Jewish family, in this time, I wanted to play the piano. I was very young, but my parents were too scared to bring the piano to the courtyard. You know, we had neighbors, and they were too afraid to bring the piano. Well, the Jews are bringing the piano. They didn't want to do it, so they brought me a hidden piano in a suitcase. It happened to be the accordion. Only half of it looked like a piano, actually. The other half didn't. And I did become actually a virtuoso on this instrument. In Poland, I was actually the first person to play for the opening of Polish television. When Polish television first broadcast its message to the world, I was televised. Then, to make a long story short, I came to Israel after Poland allowed Jews to leave from the prison of communism. And when I arrived, somebody said to me, "Why don't you compete in the America-Israel Prize for Music? Because we heard you play, why don't you go?" Well, I went, and you know, it's a competition. There are hundreds of young people, you know, from the age of, I don't know, 7, 8 to the age of, 25 on different instruments, mostly cello, violin, piano, voice, clarinet. Well, I had a very different instrument. The instrument was accordion. And I could see when I was in this competition, the door would open and the young people would come out, without a smile. Clearly, it was very difficult to be in that room and play something. When I went into that room, I was too weak to carry the accordion. It was a more than 3.5 octave accordion, probably almost my height. And my father carried it into the room, and the 3 people who were in the room were just completely shocked. They never saw somebody competing on this instrument in a serious classical music competition. The 3 people were not just anybody. Mrs. Kusevitsky, who was one of the major patrons of music, the wife of Sarge Kusevitsky, who was the founder of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. A name you might know, Zino Francescatti, probably one of the greatest violinists of that time, another juror, and Isaac Stern, the famous Isaac Stern, as the head of the jury. Well, I put on the accordion, my father left the room, I saw smiles on the faces of these 3 jurors, thinking that I lost my way and I came to the wrong place. But I have to tell you, when I played the first 3 chords of the toccata in D minor of Bach, and I played only classical music. When I played the 3 chords, you know, the toccata of Bach in D minor, they stopped smiling, they were serious, gripped, and then I finished my group of works with Rimsky-Korsakov's Flight of the Bumblebee, which is a very technically challenging piece. And when I finished, the 3 of them stood up, they shook my hand, and Isaac Stern took me by my shoulder to the window and said, you know, you must stop playing this instrument because there's nothing more for you to do on this instrument. You already exhausted all the possibilities of this instrument. You must play the piano. Well, it's easier said than done, because to go from the vertical keyboard to the horizontal is a big space. And of course, it was an instrument that I loved, but with that encouragement of Isaac Stern to change, to drop the instrument, my world in my mind changed. It drifted into other places. Of course, I played the accordion professionally in New York. I performed with Ashkenazi. I performed with serious classical musicians in town hall and in major venues in New York. And probably to my wife's, shock, I have to say I used to earn more money when I was 15 years old, 16 years old than I do now. Because when you're performing virtuoso, you get a lot of money. Well, anyway, that's kind of the story of how, and I played till I was about, I would say 17, 18 years old, when I realized that I was playing the wrong instrument. And thank God I played the accordion, because I would never be an architect if I didn't. I would be a musician. But playing the wrong instrument allowed me to become an architect. Life is very strange.
Okay, so what's happened afterwards? Did you move to New York, I guess?
Yes, I have 2 paradises. Most people have just one paradise. I have 2. One was Israel and one is New York, America. So when I moved to New York, I grew up in the Bronx, a tough neighborhood, with many people from around, different kinds of people, the Irish, African Americans, Jews. It's a kind of melting pot of America. And I discovered science, and I really went to a school, a very famous school, a high school, called the Bronx High School of Science. It's still a very famous school, but I have to tell you, it has produced more Nobel Prize winners than France, that one high school. So my interest turned to science, and then to, other things, and I finally stumbled over architecture.
And what's happened to your passion for music? How did you keep it alive?
Well, as an architect, really, first of all, I want to say that music is more important than architecture. Really, music is the foundation. Without music, there would be no space. Music is really the basis. Now think about it. If you go to Athens, you go to the Parthenon in Athens, you see the greatest building in the West, the temple. Think about what was there before. Before there was a building, there was just a ground. And on that ground, there was music. There was a dance which was being performed for many, many centuries before the building was built. And that dance, on the threshing floor of Athens, became the structure for the Parthenon, for the building. So that's a very simple illustration that music came before the temple. Music came before architecture. And so, as an architect, I feel that I've only changed my instrument. I no longer play on the accordion, but I play on architecture. It's an instrument. Of course, it's a means to an end. It has to, like music, well, it's very scientific instrument. It has to be very precise. You can't make any mistake. The vibrations are not approximate, but are exact. You cannot almost sing a melody. You have to either sing the melody or it's not a melody. And architecture is very much the same. It's very geometric, very exact, very scientific, very precise. But at the end, both music and architecture don't speak just to the mind. They speak to the soul, to the heart. When you listen to a mass, when you listen to a great concerto, when you're in a great piece of architecture, it's not just an intellectual experience, it's a spiritual experience. And there is the connection, music and architecture.
By the way, you studied in one of the most interesting and cutting-edge universities in the US at the time, the Cooper Union. All your teachers were masterpieces.
Well, I was lucky because when I studied architecture in New York, there were many famous architects just beginning their careers. Richard Meyer, John Haydock, Guathmy, Graves, Michael Graves, Peter Eisenman. So there were many fantastic architects, and it was a time of change. Architects began to challenge the idea that architecture is just a box with plumbing. They started to think about other ways of looking at the culture of architecture, and I was lucky to be in school at that time.
So architecture, music, so architecture can be a passion like music, so.
Well, architecture, if you think about it, architecture is music. From the very beginning of, let's say I talked about the Parthenon, but think of the Greeks, the Pythagoreans. They discovered that the length of a vibrating string, the proportion of vibrating string lengths is exactly the same as the ratios of the golden section. So the relationship between sound, vibration of sound, and harmony in vibrating string is the same as it is in classical proportions of mathematics. That was a huge discovery. That's why the Greeks gave us the idea of harmony, cosmic harmony, that the cosmos is not just a chaos, but there is an order to it, which is, let's say, superhuman order of sound and music. And that has always been really part of my experience, not just as an architect, and probably of your experience as well.
So let me go back to Paganini, the reason why we're here. So Paganini was famous not just for his composition, but for his unique technique to go behind the technical possibility of the instrument. His technique was called transcendence, to go behind. And in a certain way, your architecture can be considered, there are some similarities to go behind the shape, to stress the technique of the architecture and in the research of something new. What's your opinion?
Well, that's a good point. Think about it. Paganini was able to break all the strings on the violin. He was able to break the strings and play on a single string. That's like architecture. We sometimes have only a string of money, which means a low budget. But he had to still produce a fantastic piece of music. So Paganini's techniques and Paganini's really subversion of how music was performed before him is very similar to what I feel about architecture, because architecture is within a frame. It's a very closed frame to build something which is functional, which is on budget, which does its job, but at the same time to create a piece of art. That's really, I think, the inspiration of Paganini, and a very similar, I think, metaphor to what architects or even artists, sculptors, writers, filmmakers do.
How do you make it possible? What's your secret? Can you share it?
Well, you know, there's no secret. You have to try to do the impossible. By that I mean, you have to get in contact with the site, with the place that you're building, by listening to it. Not just looking at it, not just making a picture of a photograph, or even a sketch, but by burying your head into the ground to listen to the vibrations of the earth. That's one way of being inspired by a site. And of course, it's not easy to explain how it is done, because it's not a formula. You cannot really explain art. We cannot really explain Paganini's genius. We know how he lived. We know that he was a passionate man, that he was in trouble sometimes, that he was unique, but we don't have the key to his secret. His secret was Paganini. I think that's really the idea of art. There is no key to it except when you see it, when you're in it, when you can enjoy it.
Yeah, we just seen the exhibition half an hour ago, and the things that touched me more was the tremendous influence that Paganini music has on those who followed him. Probably for this technique, for this ability. What do you think?
Well, I think it's more than his technique. I mean, you know, what is a virtuoso? A virtuoso is someone, for him the technique can be destroyed. The previous technique can be eliminated. That's why virtuosos have very few followers. By the way, I think we talked about this earlier. The reason Paganini is not completely loved around the world is because very few people can play his music. It's not by coincidence that he is not as well known as Beethoven, as Mozart, as Brahms. It's because his music is very difficult to play. There are only a few people who can actually perform his music. And there are some other geniuses like that, whose music is not really performed because they are too difficult. So that's kind of, you know, the enigma of genius. That's certainly enigma of genius.
So let's shift to the other reason why we are here tonight. That is your book, Edge of Order. We are here also to present, to launch your book. It has just published by Penguin Random House, one of the most, say, worldwide publisher, American, I mean, English. Global, yeah, of course. So, starting from that title, Edge of Order, that is very inspiring. What's the meaning? What's the reason?
Well, I call it Edge of Order, and I start with a quote of Paul Valéry, the great French poet, thinker, who said that the civilization is threatened by two dangers: order and disorder. Those are the threats to civilization at all times. And life develops by avoiding these extremes, by avoiding the extreme of order and avoiding the extreme of disorder. So it's an in-between order or disorder. And that's really how I practice architecture, because we see how bad it is in the world. When the world seems to have an order, we also see how bad it is when the world has disorder. So how to navigate between these two really dangers, I think, is really part of art, but also probably part of life. So the book is really about that. And it's really an attempt to make architecture available to everybody, because I think that everybody is creative and everybody can be an architect, really. Everybody can be a musician. You can whistle a melody. You can pick up a pencil and make a drawing. Maybe it's not very good in the beginning, but you can try. You can take your iPhone and make a film. You can compose a poem or even write a short story. But when I say you can be an architect, people say, oh no, it's too much, it's impossible. Why? Why? I think it's just really the propaganda of history. Because architecture is just like poetry, it's just like music. It's no more or less difficult than all the other arts. And that's what the book is about. By the way, I have a chapter there which says, to be an architect, you don't have to go to school. You don't have to acquire all the tools. You don't have to know all the laws. You don't have to go and practice with other architects. All you need to do is only two things. You need to read a couple of books, and you need to travel. Now, that's not my quote. That's a quote of Le Corbusier, the great architect of the 20th century. That's what he thought. He said, you don't need to do all those other things. All you need to do is to read a couple of books, 2 or 3 books probably, no more. They have to be the right books. And travel to some interesting places. See how other people live. And he did that as well. So yes, that's what the book is about.
So I love the quote you start of Paul Valéry. So order and disorder, always a balance, a dialogue. It come up in my mind, the project you did, I think, in South Korea is a dancing tower, like massing buildings that are relations between each other that dance.
Well, yes, I think every building is born from an idea. And in my book, I have a painting, one of my favorite paintings by Vermeer, that great Dutch master. And it's a painting of a woman playing a harpsichord. And I asked the question, what is this painting about? I think anybody who looks at this painting, and you don't have to know anything about Dutch art, or anything about art at all, anybody who looks at this painting will say, it's not really about a woman playing a harpsichord, it's about something else. You can see it in the painting, you can see it in the colors, you can see it in the light, that the theme is a woman playing harpsichord, but the idea of the painting is somewhere else. That's kind of like architecture. That's how an idea of architecture is. Idea of architecture, well, of course, there's going to be a building, there's going to be a door or a window, but idea is really somewhere else. It's in the materials, in the light, in the proportions, in the structure, and that's really the idea of space, the idea of a building.
Yeah. In the book, you affirm, for this reason, that the thought that goes into building is far more important than the concrete, the steel used to erect it. And an engineer can argue that.
Well, look, material is very important, but material, what is it without culture? What is it if it doesn't become alive? Then it's just dead material. We see so many dead buildings, even dead cities, dead neighborhoods that don't give a good life to people. But we also can see very modest materials used in a way that is inspiring. I have to say that recently I won a competition in New York City for public social housing. It's very low cost. It's in Bedford-Stuyvesant, where it's a very poor neighborhood, really the African-American neighborhood, very poor housing. And I decided, I've done a lot of, luxurious buildings and so on. I would like to enter a competition to demonstrate that architecture can be produced not just because it has a lot of money, but with very little money. You can still provide something exceptional to people who need to live there. So yes, that's really the question about architecture and also about music. Because think about it, a violin has only 4 strings. And they are made from horsehair. It's almost nothing. A violin is a piece of wood. It's some strings that are stretched. How amazing that you can create a world, a cosmos from such a poor material object. It's really very, 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 it's very modest. Really, a violin is a very modest instrument. in comparison to organ, for example, a gigantic church organ, which is very elaborate and difficult to build. So yes, that's a good example that architecture is like a violin. You know, first of all, like a musical instrument, it has to look beautiful. The violin is a beautiful shape, don't you think so? It's just a beautiful object. But it also has a function, which is to transport you somewhere else. You know, when you play the instrument correctly, like Paganini or like, Oistrakh or like Yehudi Menuhin or like Heifetz, you're transported into somewhere else. It's amazing. And architecture is, I think, very similar.
So let's talk about one of your masterpieces, the Berlin Jewish Museum. That building that, in my point of view, fixed a significant point in a way of looking architecture, not just your, but architecture in general, made a difference. So you wrote in the book that you got inspired by Arnold Schoenberg. There is a, I think, interesting story behind that. Can you share it with us?
Yes. Well, you know, the Jewish Museum in Berlin is not just designed with architectural ideas. It's designed what I would call para-architectural ideas. Not exactly architecture ideas, but ideas shifted. So when I thought about designing that building, the center of that building, which is a void, which is a disconnected void in which nothing can really be shown. The history has been murdered. The history has been destroyed. There is only an emptiness. So I thought of Arnold Schoenberg, who wrote in Berlin a very famous opera, which you might know or not know, called Moses and Aaron. It's an amazing opera because he wrote 2/3 of the opera and then he abandoned it. 1936, he had to leave Berlin, so he abandoned the opera. And the opera ends in the second act when Moses calls to God. And that's the end of the opera. That's the last chord of the opera. There's a silence and nothing follows. It was supposed to be. The third act was supposed to follow. But it was abandoned, and of course Schoenberg was in exile, and as a Jew, he had to escape from Germany. Now I thought I could complete the opera. You could complete the opera in a musical way, in a way that Schoenberg could not complete it. I could complete it by the echoes, acoustical echoes, of the footsteps of the visitors across this void. So when you are in the Jewish Museum Berlin, and you stop for a minute, and you listen to the echoes of footsteps across the emptiness, you're hearing actually the answer that God gave to Moses that Schoenberg never really completed in Moses and Aaron. That was a very specific musical, acoustical idea of reorienting the way people would understand and see and experience the building. Now I have to add that the sense of balance, the reason we have balance, that we can walk and we don't fall down, is in the ear. I don't know whether you ever thought about it, but it's not in the eye. It's in the inner ear. So the ultimate ground of stability is the ear, not the eye, not the mind, not the hand, not the foot, the ear. So the ear is, an incredible organ, because to listen is to hear the world. That's what the world sounds like when you hear it. And so it's also obviously a technique that I've used in a number of other projects, including Ground Zero. When I proposed at Ground Zero as a master planner the waterfalls, it was very controversial. Most of the press had headlines: "This is a crazy idea, impossible idea. How is it possible to bring Niagara Falls to the center of Manhattan?" But my idea was acoustical, to bring the water deep down from the surface all the way down to the bedrock, to be able to hear the sound of water and not the sound of cars. And I think if you come to New York, if you stand in the center of this busy piece of New York City, you can see the names of those who died, and you can hear the sound of water. You really don't hear the cars. You don't hear the ambulances, the fire trucks. You don't hear the noise, which is so powerful in New York. You hear the speech of water. You hear the water speaking to the names. So those are two projects where explicitly acoustics, the ear, was the center of the project rather than anything else.
There is another project quoted in your book, the West Side Shopping Mall, that is a great project, not just great, but huge, okay? For those who don't know, it's in the year it was built, this shopping mall was the most profitable and important shopping mall in Switzerland. Not just retail, food court, elderly house, hotel, kindergarten, whatever. It's really a piece of town, okay? You report that you got inspiration from the soundtrack of a Marx Brothers movie.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, I think Marx Brothers are, to me, more important than Karl Marx. Definitely. Because they are really exploring the ultimate horizons of what human beings are about. And I saw a movie, maybe you did not see it, but I recommend it, called The Big Store. The Big Store, movie made in 1920s by the Marx Brothers, is about the Marx Brothers taking over a big store, like Macy's in New York. They basically stay in the store after it closes and start using all the things in the store. The kitchen, the beds, the sofas, the tables, the equipment. They said, you know, they basically take over the store. Kind of anarchists. They took over a big store. Well, I thought that was a great idea. That, you know, a shopping center should not be made for people to shop. People should be able to take over the store. It belongs to them. First of all, for fun. Second of all, maybe they will shop, but that's not important. Most important is to be in control of the whole store. And that was my strategy, how I designed the shopping center, by making the spaces. Of course, they have to work, you know, commercially. They are functional spaces, but they have to work in a way that is rather different than the typical store, shopping center, that tries to make you buy things. So I told my client, Migros in Switzerland, that my aim is not for people to shop. My aim is for people to feel that the store belongs to them in many different ways. In the way they use it, in the way the light falls, in opening new spaces, in creating a different synergy of program. And yeah, and it worked. You know, it worked.
In the book, Edge of Order, you make an interesting parallel between an architectural work and a symphony. So a symphony like an architectural work. So do you think the architect could be a kind of direttore d'orchestra?
Well, an architect or a master planner is a director of a huge orchestra. Now think about it. If you don't know music, if you have been to the exhibition and you see the scores of the capriccios, they're just dots and lines and some numbers sometimes and some signs that, if you don't know the code, mean absolutely nothing. They're just dots, lines, numbers, some other things that are in the kind of score. Just like in architecture, if you don't know the code to architecture and you look at a plan of this amazing building or the elevation, it's just a bunch of lines and numbers and codes that you have to have the key. If you can open that code, you can play that music. If you can open the code of architecture, you can see the space. And of course, to perform music and architecture, you have to give the score to somebody else. It's not your score. You have to give it to the musicians who are going to play it. You have to give in architecture the drawing to people who will build it. Sometimes to thousands of people, not just one, but gigantic organizations that have to build an entire city. So, and at the end, just like a composer, an architect is not visible on the stage. An architect, more like a conductor, has his back to the audience. You don't see his face. In a master plan, you know, you might see the violinist, tower number 1. You might see tower number 2 in the cello. You might see the memorial, which is a tuba. You might see the voice in the slurry wall. But you don't see the conductor. The conductor is responsible for the performance to make sure that all the instruments and all the architects and all the people who are working are playing in a correct way. And to play correctly also means to give a margin of freedom to interpret. You know, a music could not be good if you could not interpret it. If Paganini was just a machine, we wouldn't listen to it. It's because every violinist can interpret Capriccio 24 in a different way. And the same thing is true for a master plan or even for a building. It needs an edge of interpretation to give freedom to the workers, to the craftsmen, to the people who are making the work together. And I think there you can see very closely how close the documents of architecture and music are, even graphically, and as a process of performance, because at the end, they have to be performed. And that performance is social. It's not a private performance. It's a social performance for the city, for the citizens. So there it is, a very short description, almost of an identical art, just using different means.
So now let me ask you something, a question I believe on behalf of all the architects seated here, including myself. So we are all aware how difficult is our work doing architecture, how many hiccups happens during a building process from the early stage till the final construction. So how did you manage to erect such beautiful buildings, keeping everyone committed, focused, and managing the issues that always here and there come out?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer. First of all, you have to be married to a Nina, my wife and my partner. You know, she's here, but I have to tell you, I would never be an architect if she was not my partner. I would be doing something completely different. But she really does all the things that I can't do, that I wouldn't even know how to do. So that's number one. Number two, you have to have good luck. You know, you need luck. Some, architects were not lucky. Look at Piranesi, one of my favorite architects. He was not very lucky. He only built one church, small church in Rome. He should have built 100. He was such a genius. A little bit like Paganini in architecture, Piranesi, with his prisons and so on. So yes, and third of all, you have to enjoy and believe in what you're doing. You can't give up too easily. You can't, you can't become a pessimist. Anyway, to be a pessimist, to have a gloomy picture of the world is a waste of time. So many people I see today are pessimists about politics, about the world, about economics. But I think it's such a waste of time. It's better to do something positive. And anybody can do something positive if you want to, from any angle at all. Especially children. We know children are not pessimists. Children are always moving towards the future with a smile. And that's also, I think, an important thing. Even if you lose, if you fail, if you don't succeed, it might really be a good thing. A failure might not be the end of the world. The failure might be to try to fail even more the next time by doing something even more daring. Look, some of the capriccios, particularly of Paganini, are on the border of failure. They are so close to really breaking down. And that's what makes them these ultimate works, because they're just on the edge of the impossible, both in playing and performance, and also actually in the music itself. So yes, taking the risk without any guarantees is good. There's no insurance in architecture. There's no insurance in life. Nobody can be sure about anything. We can't be sure about anything in the world. And yet, we have to look at the light, follow a path without being pulled to the left and without being pulled to the right, staying straight on that straight course. That's at least my way.
And when you look back, did things develop differently?
You know, most gurus that you know, the gurus around the world in religion, in life techniques, in yoga, in business, tell you, what's your goal? What is your goal? How are you going to get to your goal? And I always thought this is really funny, because the best thing is to have no goal. If you have no goal, but a path, you will discover something. You don't really know what. But I never believed in the goal. And I never had a goal, actually. My goal was to do things I believed in. I drew for so many years. I believed this was fantastic. But I had no goal that this is a step to another step to another step to another step. So things happen when you follow a path without necessarily knowing where it's going to take you. But it's an adventure. Don't you think so? Life is an adventure. It really is. I'm sure you know that. It's an adventure. How it ends depends actually on the balance, on this, avoiding to be ordered and avoiding to be disordered. That's an acrobatic feat.
So, talking about method, in your book you refer about a unique method used by the famous expressionist German architect Erich Mendelsohn to conceive architecture. It's something that I didn't know. Can you share it?
Well, different architects who were also artists had different techniques. Now, Erich Mendelsohn, who built some fantastic buildings in Germany in 1920s, 30s, later in America, his technique was to listen to a piece of music, let's say a Beethoven overture, and to draw a sketch based on that feeling. A Bach, moment, a Paganini. He would just draw something with his hand, and that became the building. But every artist has a technique. Leonardo da Vinci, in his notebooks, says that if you really want to be a good painter and you want to draw something really fantastic, like a battle or a war between, two different sides, he says, go and find an empty wall. Go and find an old wall that is completely empty, that has nothing in it. He says, when you go to that wall, it looks empty. But if you stay there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you will see the whole painting in front of it. You'll see the whole composition in front of you, in that empty wall. And it's true, I tried it actually. I tried it. Because there's no empty wall. Every wall has already something in it that's interesting. So those are the techniques of different architects. Alberti, Brunelleschi, particularly the Italian architects, had amazing techniques. I mean, who was it? I think it was not Brunelleschi, it was Bernini. His technique, he called it the macchia. Make a blot of ink. Just like Jackson Pollock. Make an ink blot. Then look at it, and you'll find the shape of the most beautiful figure that can be also a plan of a building.
So now we are about to close. Let's shift to the final topic. I organized that is one day in life. You conceived, for me, a unique event. I had the chance to attend it. You conceived a music event in the city of Frankfurt that lasted for 24 hours. So, can you describe the idea that's behind that and how it worked?
Yes, thank you. Well, you know, the Frankfurt Opera, the city of Frankfurt asked me what I wanted to do in architecture in this big city, important city in Germany. And they thought I would make an installation, some space, some architectural, but I had another idea. How to discover the city through music. And I called it One Day in Life because it's a unique event, 24 hours. So I found places in the city that were really unique. Sometimes that even people who lived in the city did not know. And there were more than 75 different performances with different people. And I'll give you an example of the places. And for each place, I also constructed a program of ancient music or classical music, but also contemporary music, music of the last, let's say, 100 years as a program. So for example, I convinced a hospital, the biggest hospital in Frankfurt, to allow me, or the event, to use the operating room. You know, very hard to get a hospital to allow you to use an operating room for a performance. But I thought that would be a performance about illness. And the program there was, I had Marine Marais, the great French 17th century, 18th century composer who composed music about surgery of the gallstone, to be exact, played on classical instruments. And in the same hospital room, operating room, there was a master of the sitar from India who performed music that the Hindus would perform for such an operation. So the places where the music played were different. For example, I had a performance in a very poor part of town where immigrants, mostly immigrants that have come to the city, young men, learn how to box. It's a sport, how to box. And I had one of the great pianists playing in the boxing ring the last Beethoven piano sonata, connecting music, immigrants, and also this poor little space. But there were many. I had the concert in the biggest kitchen in Frankfurt, which played Telemann's music of the table, but also contemporary music of Ligeti, of the 100 metronomes, because kitchen is about anxiety, about time. So I had many performances, a performance in the largest swimming pool in the city. I had a performance in the bunker of Frankfurt, and many different performances, like a topography of an unknown city through the music that was played in those places. And it was, when I first suggested, the people said, who's going to come here? Maybe, 1,000 people or 2,000 people. But really, thousands of people, 30,000, 35,000 people came. 35,000, many of whom have never been to the Frankfurt Opera, who would never have attended a concert in the Opera House, came and enjoyed really the fact that the city is built from music. And the places are also come to you through music in a completely new way. Kind of building a city through music. And of course, I didn't build anything, quote unquote. I didn't build any building. But I felt that this was really a project of building something in Frankfurt. And it is true that it has, because I've spoken to many people who have written to me, who felt that the city changed. For example, I had in the subway stations, in the subway cars, I had the music of Mozart being performed, and people were running to work, and some of them thought it's strange, some crazy people with violence in the train, but they were playing a Mozart concerto. Some people stopped and listened. Some people took photographs. Some people thought it was crazy. Something was wrong with the city. So it was an amazing event that really showed, like in the ancient time, that the cities can be created by music. And you know that in the Greek mythology, in Pausanias, for example, there's a story that the walls of Thebes were built by a musician who was playing music. And we know that the walls of Jericho were destroyed by music. So music has the capacity to create and also to destroy.
Okay, thank you. Tonight was incredible. So let me finish with a quote from you from the program of One Day Life, the one that I loved more, that I think wrap up the discussion shared today. And by the way, for the audience afterwards, I think there is a little room for some questions, and then I think you're at disposal to sign some books. So, and of course I read the quote and you're free to comment if you want. So, every city creates its own structure through dreams. The streets we walk on and the topographies we experience are simultaneously really here, but also in our dreams.
Well, for sure, we have to dream about something better than what we have. We have many problems, but we have to dream. Well, I don't mean dream by falling asleep, by dream being conscious. Something really that can improve the lives of people, can bring joy to the world, and can bring something that we really all need, which is the spirit. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, I think there are questions. 5 minutes. Bene, grazie ancora.
Grazie. Thank you.
Se ci sono domande, lascio il microfono.
Good evening, Mr. Libeskind. I am Alessandro La Pietra. I'm from Genova, and I would like to ask you what do you think about our city? What do you suggest to our mayor, to our politician to make it alive again after the collapse of the bridge? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you know that you live in a great city. This is one of the most beautiful and historic cities in the world. Of course, every city needs to regenerate itself. And particularly with the tragedy of the bridge, I think there is an opportunity to really take this tragedy and that memory of what happened on the day and use it for the future. Not just remember the horror of that day and the people who died, but use this occasion to transform the space which is there with the memory that is so important to keep in the city, but also to use it for the future, to use that memory to create something more fantastic for the citizens of Genoa. So yes, I think every city needs, and maybe this is a moment of this tragedy, could be a moment of awareness that what happened here, which cannot be changed, in the past cannot be changed, but the future can be. And that's, I think, something that I think every citizen would appreciate, because cities really are in competition. You know, it's not countries, it's not Italy and Germany and Russia and America, it's Genova and Milan and Frankfurt and New York and Beijing. So cities really are the cultural engines And I would recommend to any politician to raise the bar, to raise the standard of expectations in a city. You know, better public transport, better education, better architecture, cleaner streets, more opportunity for young people. You know, things that we all want to achieve. Those should be really the dreams that can be accomplished by a city as historical and as successful as the city of Genoa.
Un famoso psicoanalista italiano ebreo diceva che la malattia professionale degli psicoanalisti non è essere muti, ma essere sordi. Credo che anche per gli architetti ascoltare i sogni delle persone, il mood dell'aria, il soul dell'environment sia la prima cosa, prima che disegnare, prima che progettare, prima che creare.
I agree with that, yes. I agree, if I understood it completely, yes. Absolutely. One more question.
Hello, I'm Polish, I'm not Italian, and I would like to ask you, what would you say to Italians who say again and again, we have so many historical monuments we cannot rescue and we cannot take care of. What do you think about that? Is it impossible to save all these treasures, or are Italians right? Or
Well, you know, if you have treasures of another time, it's an obligation to take care of them. You can't let beautiful architecture, beautiful spaces disintegrate. That's a very important thought. But in my view, the only way that these treasures can be kept is to do something new with them. It's not only to, quote, just restore them, because you cannot restore anything to a time past. Nothing can go back in time. Things can only go into the future. They cannot go backwards. So they need new life. Old things need new investment. And investment is, I don't mean only money, but they need new ideas how to use the spaces, even new architectural interventions to make the spaces live in the 21st century. And I think Italy is such an amazing country with the richest architecture in the world, with amazing architecture, you know, from north to south, from east to west, that Italy should be the model of history, which means history is both in the past and in the future because of what we do in the present. That's what I think. Thank you.
Scusate, ci sono dei libri in vendita in fondo al banco, chi vuole comprare e vuole la firma sul libro